Well, it's time to read again from Hebrews, this time from chapter 3. Chapter 3, we'll start with 15, read the rest of the chapter, and delight in these scriptures because we are talking about that we have the new and the better because of Jesus, and certainly we do. Listen to these good verses, please. Hebrews 3, verse 15. While it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. Now that's talking about when Israel provoked God in the wilderness. Then verse 16. For some, when they had heard, did provoke. Israelites heard, and they still provoked God. Howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. Not everyone provoked God. Remember Joshua and Caleb, for example. But with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? Now think of that a bit. God was upset with those folks for 40 years. Do you think God's upset today about anything?
Oh, yeah.
Oh. So God does get upset, as well as all the other good things that we like to think about. But anyway, verse 18, and to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believe not. So, we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Unbelief. Now, we've talked about the wonderfulness of the new that we have because of Jesus. And because of this, we certainly are encouraged. But here he's telling us now, we need to exhort one another, each other, to be faithful. And rightfully so. This thing of life and living for God is long term. When you're young, you get excited over something immediate. But as the years roll by, you begin to realize that this thing is long term, and you don't want to forsake what is good, what is the best, or you're going to head into a dead end. So no wonder communion time is a valuable time for us to stop and think. And I know that's why we come to church anyway, is to do some good thinking. But communion time is a special time. Now, out of these few verses that we read, we want to point out two things. And the first one is this. Today, we must hear and harden not our hearts as so many did of the Israelites. That's too bad, but it's still too bad today. We must listen. But you know, those Israelites, on their way to the better, the promised land, they had the better coming. They had come out of slavery. And what was down there in Egypt, they had the better coming. Just as we do. but they seriously stumbled. And I know from learning of this when young, couldn't understand why those people would forsake and do what they did when they had such evidence of God all around them. But then over the years, I see other people doing the same thing. Even people we know, stumbling and making the serious mistakes. And you know, we know the stories of the Israelites, how they murmured. Do I murmur? We heard about their complaining. Do I complain? We remember that golden calf that they worshipped. Oh my goodness. Why would they do a thing like that? Did we do anything like that? Oh. All those stories. But the reason they did it was because they did not believe strong enough. Strong enough. So we are urged to hear. Hear diligently and be teachable people, listening people, and be glad for what we hear. You know, I'm so glad for what I heard Mama say and Dad said in those years, and the Sunday school teachers back in those years. I'm so glad for that. We need to be glad. So we're urged not to harden or callous our hearts, which is very possible. There are so many things that can crust over our sensitivities to the spiritual. And oh, haven't you seen it? Haven't you experienced it? Don't you observe it? So many things. I say complacency is one of those things that calluses us. We get complacent, satisfied. Yeah. And I think sometimes we get angry with life. Don't you see that? Things come at us so strong and so in many ways. And they hurt. And they're unreasonable. And if we're not careful, we get angry. Upset with life itself. And another big thing that crusts over our soul, or can crust over our soul, is television. I want you to know that I haven't gone to the movie theater since I was a teenager, and I do not plan to go there. And I got a bigger reason the last 2 or 3 weeks than I've ever had. Have you heard anything good come out of Hollywood of late? Have you been listening to what they talk about, those people? How the men treat the women? And of course the women get them all back. And the ungodliness that pours out of that place. I hear it worse now than I've ever heard it in all my life. I am not going to go to the theater and finance those people out there in Hollywood. That's my biggest reason right now. Just listen to the news. Maybe you need to read it on your computer because the news doesn't tell you everything. But those people are wicked. And they don't care if you are influenced. Because, after all, those people are just playing. Yeah. Television and all its propaganda crusts us over. Personal habits and personal pleasures, after a while, crusts over our sensitivity to the spiritual. You know, the spiritual things of God's Word, like we even read this morning, can get so lost when Saturday night we're out pleasuring ourselves with something else or whatever. Personal habits. And the pursuit of money. From all corners of everywhere come the responsibilities of paying off something. The electricity goes up, the gas goes up, the taxes go up, property taxes go up, and from every corner comes more cry for more money out of your pocket, and you have to chase after something to pay that, and they're just the normal things of life, without adding the pleasure costs. And so we get crusted over to the spiritual because of so many life's demands. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everywhere you go, it's calling for more. And listen, wrong friendships can sure do you in. They can callous our hearts, harden our hearts. We need tender hearts for the things that are spiritual, for the things that are just plain good. Get back to enjoying apple pie. For example, and a good church dinner. Yeah, the wrong friendships. But listen, whatever pushes the spiritual goodness out of your life is what can crust you over and harden your heart. God was grieved with Israel for 40 years, and He can be grieved with us if we do not keep our hearts tender, softened, sensitive to the spiritual and the good and the wholesome that life is really meant to be. So don't harden your heart. And then there's the second thought here. The reward of rest will be lost because of unbelief. We go to church. Most of you are here every Sunday. And we have a belief system that's been growing over the years. But is it strong enough? Whatever, folks, keep adding to your believing strength. Even as life goes on, you need a strong believing system, a strong believing way about you. Because things are not going to get any easier. I'll grant you. There's just another angle that's coming at you. The wilderness journey for those people was so full of hardship, toil. What's the water supply? Oh, I get tired bending over picking up this manna every day. On and on. We need some meat. Send us some quail. The way was hard. And that promised land, yeah, they were promised something better, but it seemed like it was so far off, so far away. Do I have enough to believe in all that? So many of those people, most all of those people, they perished without experiencing that rest, that promised land, and of course the warning is self-evident. Our journey of life is long, and it's full, and it's hard, and even we older ones are not done yet, and you younger ones have more years out there. It calls for hardship. It calls for toil, endless fatigue. It gets difficult. We have our happinesses, but we have our disappointments, and it all seems to be endless, hard and difficult. But God has planned for a rest, and I wonder sometimes if He hasn't put us through all this hardship so that we'll long for our rest more and more every day. He's promised it to us. But the biggest enemy of all to gaining our rest is an unbelief, a low level of believing. Don't let it happen. So stay strong in your believing. Feed it at church, feed it at home. And when you come to communion and you take the loaf, you take the cup, and you lift it to your lips, revitalize your grit and grip on life. I am going to believe even when it's hard to believe. I am going to believe when I'm frustrated. I'm going to believe even when I doubt. Don't allow your heart to get insensitive and hard, but be a strong believer so that you can enter into your rest. Amen. You've lived your whole life for a rest. And that's what this Hebrews is talking about. Take that cup, take that loaf, and say, Lord, I'm in it for the long term. Yes. Why not?